Hi everyone, this is Dr. Manas Shome. I am a DevOps evangelist, a thought leader, a patent holder, and a DevOps consultant. So now we will be talking about BizDevOps today and a framework around BizDevOps that we had been working with, we had been experiencing with our customers, implementing them, and looking at the kind of feedback that we're getting from the industry at large. So let me start with where we started. Okay. So when we had been working in DevOps since a few years now, uh, we had been looking at different kinds of organizations across retail, across BFSI or banking and financial services, telecom, utilities, energy organizations, companies, etc. And when we consolidated all those experiences, we jotted down all those things in our book, Assessing DevOps. Now, while we had been defining how DevOps as an IT paradigm needs to be assessed, needs to be looked at, we've suddenly found that the industry is trying to still struggling rather to bridge the gap between IT and business. Okay. So now to bridge this gap, we wanted to get the business on board onto the DevOps journey at large and see how you can build a success story, how you can measure the efficacy of business through your IT paradigm, which is essentially DevOps driven. Okay. Now, when we say DevOps, we are essentially talking about all its variants that exist. We talk of DevOps, DevSecOps, MLOps, DataOps, etc., XOps. Okay. Now, where again we went back, there are different organizations. First, how do I know if my business is agile enough and it quickly adjusts to change? Can I gauge that from the IT metrics that are already existing and available with me? Okay, most of it either manually collected, help in IT aligned with my business that are not aligned to IT, that do not yet involve IT. So how do I do it? Now, why this question came is because of the principal paradigm of enterprise agility. When we looked at enterprise architectures, we went one step above. We started looking at the business operating models, and we saw that enterprise agility is a combination of your business agility and IT agility. IT agility in itself doesn't guarantee business efficacy. So that's why we started looking at BizDevOps, where business becomes a core part of your DevOps journey. Okay. Now, when we look at businesses at large, okay, we generalize them. Now, as you see here, we have a set of stakeholders. Okay, you have your suppliers, the regulatory bodies, the outsourced third-party vendors, etc., who sit at the left, who are actually helping you run the business. And then at the very right, you have your core objective: serve your shareholders, your stakeholders in the company, the regulatory bodies, and the community at large. Okay, so we are looking at sustainability, for example, when it comes to the larger community. So if you look at the core parts of the business, we define business as a set of line functions in this scenario. Okay, and then a set of support functions that actually engages those line functions in a fruitful manner. Now, when we look at this, it very much is similar to the pipeline that we look at from an IT perspective. So your line functions is the core pipeline that has to run, and then which is supported by your supporting functions. So essentially, we look at your inbound logistics from a business perspective. We look at what are the inputs coming to your business, what are the things that are raw materials to business, and then you have your core operations that act on those inputs. And then there are a set of outbound logistics. So there are outcomes, there are certain products that you make, but then you have to have the right logistics channels, distribution systems built in to actually take it to your end consumer. And then there are components like marketing and sales, our services and support functions that we felt should be part of this line function itself, because they actually drive how this entire pipeline runs and achieve your core objectives. Now, with that, when we look at the different support structures across a business, we are looking at finance, we are looking at administration and procurement, you have human resources, you have information technology, which is us, the IT organizations across the world, and then the enterprise infrastructure. Okay, so when we look at the enterprise infrastructure, it's not just your IT infrastructure, it's much more than that. We are looking at the enterprise, we are looking at the machines, we are looking at the facilities that you have set up to run your factories, okay, or your service centers, your different kinds of infrastructure that helps you deliver those core objectives of business. So looking at this entire scenario and generalizing it over a set of line functions with a few support functions across the business, what traditionally has been called the staff functions, by the way, we started looking at certain things that has been happening with banks. Why banks is because I currently am engaged in BFSI or with BFSI organizations, banking, financial services, and insurance organizations. And taking that particular example, we saw that you have a lot of BFSI functions. We have retail banking, commercial banking, investment and private banking, currency, foreign currency exchange, tax and audit, etc., etc. Now, when we look at these business functions today, the banks or any other business, if you look at retail, if you look at telecom, they are trying to get onto a digital transformation whereby you can actually bring all these functions up to speed in a way which are very efficient, okay, in terms of delivering those core objectives. Now, on the other hand, when we looked at, when we had been talking to the CIOs and CTOs of different banks or financial organizations, the CEOs there, we found that they're actually looking at how can the business move to support cognitive functions so that there is a lot of accuracy, a lot of greatness about the customer experiences that gets delivered. Okay, so we look at predictive analytics to start with, we look at then prescriptive analytics, and then we look at action feedback and rationalization of the actions being taken by machines, right? So we look at things like machine learning, NLP, etc., etc. But then those are the cognitive functions that banks are trying to support multiverse. Okay, now that's a little futuristic, but then the primary question is you have your BFSI functions and there you are trying to go to a cognitive world in some ways, not in every way right now, but then how do you map or how do you bridge the gap in between? So that's the question from a cognitive banking, from a futuristic banking perspective. And this actually we found when we started talking to retail organizations, when we started talking to any other industry verticals, we saw that at different levels, at different degrees, every business is trying to get into this kind of a journey. Okay, now how to bridge that gap? That's the basic question. Now, when we looked at this question, we started modeling the business in a way that can more and more align to the IT functions that we currently support. Now, what happened is as we started building those frameworks, as we started mapping our IT metrics to the business metrics, looking at how you can measure business efficacies, we saw that there are 8 arms of this BizDevOps spider, as we call it today, which are very important in ensuring that your business efficacies are maintained and they are improved over time. Okay, so when we started doing such implementations for some of the organizations we work with at different levels, not that every bank is trying to do BizDevOps in a full-fledged manner, there are still a little conservatism that goes in when adopting certain new stuff. But we saw that there are 8 arms of this spider that are important. To start with, there are the 4 on the left-hand side that you see, which are essentially portfolio resilience, portfolio cost, WIP inventory, how are you managing your work in progress inventory, and the functional modularity of your business. So those are the first 4 that you are trying to gauge from your IT metrics. So those are core business parameters that are important in terms of how well you're running your business. On the right hand side, we are talking about regulatory and then security, customer experience, and system resilience, right? So what you see on the right hand side are more to do with certain compliance requirements, certain things that has to be built in the pipeline as hygiene factors to start with in your journey from a traditional functional organization to a cognitive organization. So we are looking at regulatory bodies, how well you are complying to regulatory bodies in real time. So we are looking at things like RegOps. We are looking at how do you build in your regulatory policies in your IT pipelines. We are looking at security. It's so important. We had been looking at DevSecOps, and security becomes a primary component that has to be built onto your pipeline. Customer experience. Customer experience is a combination of a multitude of factors. Even from an IT perspective, we are looking at things like reliability, availability of systems. We are looking at how UIs are designed. Okay, what is the overall experience that the customer has when someone logs onto your portal, for example. And then at the end, your system resilience, even though that talks of reliability, but the overall system resilience essentially talks of if something goes down, how well it can actually recover. Okay, so how fast, how gracefully it can recover. Okay, so there are discussions around that. There are today. So on the left hand side, what you see are more to do with the core business functions and more derivable from what IT gives us. On the right hand side, they are more closer to the IT pipelines and something which you need to have in your pipelines on the very first day. Okay, so those 8 arms of BizDevOps is something that we found to be quite adequate when it comes to implementing them on realizing a BizDevOps state, so that it helps you bridge the gap between how you do your business and how cognitive you want it to become. Okay, now when we looked at when we looked at how it makes sense to IT and vice versa, so we started looking at the parameters, the IT metrics that are relevant here. And so what you see on the left hand side in the column on the left are the IT metrics. We talk about release frequency, we talk about release cycle time, mean time between failures, change success, availability, load performance, reliability, scalability, database integrity, security, and regulatory issues. So those are the core IT metrics that we saw actually makes a lot of sense when we are trying to kind of bridge that gap, trying to map these IT metrics to relevant 8 arms of the BizDevOps spider. So as you see on the top, the row at the top talks about regulatory, security, customer experience, system resilience, functional modularity, work in progress inventory, portfolio costs, and portfolio resilience. So when we started mapping these IT metrics across the business metrics that we talk about as the 8 arms, we saw that there is definitely a kind of correlation between what you see at the left column versus what you see at the topmost row. Business metrics at the row versus IT metrics towards your columns. Okay, now these correlations, and that is something that is not fixed from customer to customer or from industry to industry, but there is a typical trend of how they're related, and that is what this particular table actually shows. Okay, so what you see is, for example, if you look at regulatory compliance actually has a lot of bearing on your change success ratio in production, your database integrity, your regulatory issues that keeps creeping up in your IT service management systems. Okay. Similarly, for security, we are looking at availability, reliability, database integrity, and security issues. Not that other parameters won't have a bearing on that, but then the correlation across the different industries that we had been studying is very high when it comes to these IT metrics versus a specific given business metrics. Okay, but then these correlations will differ from industry to industry, from organization to organization. So for example, if you look at customer experience, there are a lot of parameters that actually make sense when it comes to measuring your customer experience. We're looking at release frequency, we're looking at cycle time, change success, availability, but it doesn't mean that your regulatory issues is not contributing to your customer experience, or MTBF is not contributing. They are contributing, but then the correlation, if you look at, is somewhere around what we are depicting here. Now, when we started implementing these kind of a business metrics versus IT metrics mapping from a BizDevOps perspective, we saw that there is a lot of correlation. As being mentioned here, we had been measuring those correlations across some of our organizations. And while implementing, we saw that we can really measure the business efficacy based on these IT metrics to at least at a 70 to 80% accuracy level, or that much of an error being built in. Okay. And then it will differ against organizations, and you have to keep tweaking those parameters, okay, onto your mapping systems. So there is a lot of learning that actually gets in. So while we define and implement this kind of a DevOps metrics mapping, we actually take help of certain ML algorithms that help us fine tune those parameters and the correlations between these parameters, and taking out and deriving the exact business efficacy from the IT metrics. So one word of caution is there may be business functions in a given business scenario which do not involve IT at all. Okay, there is a lot of manual work that goes in, a lot of manual feedback loops that get in. So that is something where the correlations will definitely be pretty low, but something which can be improved upon. Okay, so when those organizations and trying to talk to the CXOs of those organizations, it has to be very clear where we can find those correlations lacking, and the improvement areas that can be brought in by including IT in the overall journey for that specific portfolio or function. Okay. Now, when we started mapping this, implementing this, we saw that how do you design such an architecture? How do you design such a system? How do you start looking at mapping all those different bits and pieces together from IT to business? Okay. So when we look at this grand design, this is a very simplistic representation of what we started doing. Now, your data to your IT systems, as I said, can come in from your data pulls or push systems through IT tool chains, including logs. That is something which is an automated way to pull up relevant data onto your IT systems. And then you have your manual or third-party data feed that keeps on coming, transactional data, a lot of transactional data. Now, this has to be fed in a kind of a data store. So you have your IT pipeline data, you have your portfolio aggregated data, you have your enterprise aggregated data. And when you are looking at this data store, analyzing the data, transforming the data in a certain manner, we are having a guidance from a certain sets of databases. Now, 3 of the representational databases that we found to be very common across organizations when we are implementing this kind of a framework are the domain standards database. Now, in this case, we are talking about the BFSI, but then for your industry, you need to define your domain standards database. There would be industry standards that are already existing. For example, in BFSI, we have BEAN framework. There are other frameworks in healthcare, in retail, etc. And those are something that can be your inspiration to build your own domain standards database, because something which you may want to customize for your organization. Then you have your architecture standards database, right? Now, architecture standards database to an extent would depend on standard architecture patterns. And that's why there will be a lot of commonality even across the industry. But then you may want to have a certain set of customized architecture standards for your organization and for your portfolios and functions. The third one are the regulatory compliance databases. Now, this can be geography specific, this can be industry specific, okay? And this can be, again, a lot depends on how the government organizations are looking at regulatory compliance, okay, and how much of compliance you really need to have when you're running your business in a certain given geography. So those 3 kinds of databases are important inputs while you are transforming your data in a certain manner in your data store. When we do that, and if you look at what the outcomes of the entire analysis that you do, are a set of data representation. The data representation can be descriptive to start with. So for organizations that are starting on this kind of a journey, who are starting on looking at BizDevOps arms and trying to map them onto your IT metrics, you can start with being descriptive. You are describing a certain set of mapping as of now, and then plotting it over time, so that you can, as a human, as a management guy, or an IT architect, you can see how things are getting correlated and what can you infer from a human intellect perspective. Now, this is descriptive reporting as such, but then when we get into the analytics aspect, we start with being predictive. Can we predict based on current performance, based on the current IT metrics data, deriving the business metrics data out of it, deriving the business efficacy data out of it? Can we really predict how the business is going to perform if certain parameters in IT observe a change? Okay, so how is it going to perform tomorrow if I am changing my DevOps pipelines, or as such your IT pipelines, in a certain manner to cater to a certain given set of requirements? Then how is my business efficacy is going to change? Is there going to be an adverse effect? Is there going to be a beneficial effect? Okay, now when we do that, we are then looking at, lastly, the prescriptive analytics aspect. Now, this data store can help you actually in deriving a prescriptive set of deriving the analytics, and then prescribing you what kind of actions can be performed so that things can be made better. Okay, how you are going to reorganize your IT functions in a way, or your IT pipelines in a way that can give greater bang for the buck for your business. So that is prescriptive, that is being driven by prescriptive analytics. And once you are more comfortable, maybe you can have a roadmap of, I will have the descriptive way to look at things in the first year or till the second year. Then I will get into predictive in the third year or fourth year, and then start off looking at having prescriptive analytics in the fifth year from now. And once you have that, why can't I take an automated action? So why can't I have my AI ops systems to take care of those actions that a human would have taken or would not have taken to increase the efficiencies? But that obviously needs a lot of machine learning and deep learning that has to go into your systems to take those actions in a more confident manner. But there's something which is very achievable. Okay, so this is how we started looking at the entire scheme of things and designing these systems. Now, when we did that, we started seeing something like this. If you look at this video, we started creating these kind of dashboards. This is from one of the faster implementations that we did. And if you look at closely, the biz and the IT alignment parameters across the 8 arms are kind of changing. It's a time-lapse thing that we are showing you so that you have a better appreciation of how things look like when you have it on your dashboards. So for every parameter, we are looking at how your business is performing. So for example, if you look at portfolio resilience, the business is performing at a 40% efficacy. Now, you definitely have to define your efficacy levels. What does 40% mean for you when it comes to a business portfolio? But then you have a 40% efficacy. Whereas for security, your business efficacy runs at 97%. It's pretty secure the way your business functions are being handled. Again, comparing between your portfolio resilience and your security, the portfolio resilience IT alignment is also a little low at 49%. That essentially means while you are measuring your business efficacy as being 40%, the confidence level of that measurement is 49%. So there is a huge scope of improvement in terms of getting a better IT alignment for portfolio resilience, taking the right business metrics, finding the right correlations, and seeing that you are able to measure the business efficacies in a better manner. So that leaves a lot of ground of error when it comes to measuring portfolio resilience here. But if you look at security, IT alignment is pretty high, 90%. That essentially means that security as such is driven a lot by your IT systems, and the way information gets gathered by the IT systems that truly reflects how your business is performing from a security perspective. Okay, so this is how we start reading these metrics. Again, if you look at system resilience at the bottom right here, business shows to be having an efficacy of 43%, which is pretty low. It should improve a lot. But then IT alignment is at 88%, which is not very high at more than 90% or so, but it's pretty good. 88% of IT alignment is still there for system resilience. So if you look at system resilience, the business efficacies from a resilience perspective is pretty low, something which you need to work out from a business perspective. It is highly aligned to business. IT metrics is able to predict well that your business efficacy is pretty low for system resilience. A parameter that you need to closely look at, improve upon it. Okay, so comparing portfolio resilience, looking at portfolio resilience being at a very low business efficacy. However, there is a large chance of error because we are measuring this efficacy from IT parameters, which itself are not highly aligned to business. Whereas for security, IT alignment is pretty high and business performance is pretty good. So that way it's pretty good from both the scenarios. You may need to work a little, not work a lot more, ensuring security of your business systems. And then if you look at system resilience, IT alignment is so and so good, okay? And you don't have to really improve much on aligning IT metrics to your system resilience, but it says that your business efficacies are pretty low. So you may want to look at your business functions, the way people are being organized and working from a business function perspective, and see how you can improve them so that your IT gives better metrics and better outcomes in terms of business efficacy. The mapping actually becomes stronger that way. Okay. So with that, we would look at how you can look at an enterprise-wide view of your performance. So if you look at an enterprise-wide view, you have, as you see, your core services of your vendor and supply chain, you have your core operations, and you have your core services catering to the end consumers or customers. And below that, you have your certain common systems which are can be non-IT or IT, the internal support services, the management systems and analytics, the MIS systems, security and risk management, back office systems, compliance and audit systems. So for each of these kind of larger boxes across your enterprise, you may want to look at how your IT is performing across the IT portfolios versus how your business is performing across those portfolios. Now, given that kind of a structure, it becomes very easy to visualize how your entire enterprise is performing and then drill down onto the portfolio level analysis view that we have just seen in the earlier slide. So with that, thank you for your time. So that talks about the BizDevOps framework, the Spider framework that has been so relevant delivering to our organizations who work with us across industry verticals. Thank you.